RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOpsAF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS, for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
If you work in RevOps, you already know half your job is answering questions no one has the data for. Things like, how big is our market? Who should we target next quarter? Which accounts have the highest potential? And everyone assumes we can just magically pull those answers from where exactly? A random Google Sheet, a quick LinkedIn search, or maybe a crystal ball. That's why we partnered with HG Insights, because they actually solve that problem. HG Insights gives you real technographics, real spend intelligence, and real market signals so you're not guessing your way through planning. You get visibility into who's buying what, who's investing where, and which accounts actually match your ICP, not the imaginary one that sales and marketing made up at their offsite. Territories stop being political, segmentation stops being subjective, and your models stop getting blown up in the first 10 minutes of the business review. It's everything RevOps wishes we had on day one. So if you're ready to stop playing data detective and start operating with actual intelligence, go check out hginsights.com. You heard that right. It's hginsights.com.
Welcome to RevOpsAF, the podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kamala Thompson, and today I'm joined by Drew Smith. Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Kamala. I'm Drew. I'm the founder and CEO of Attributa. We're a consulting firm that does a lot of work in the marketing operations and marketing measurement space, including marketing attribution. Yeah, just happy to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming. It was so funny. I recorded a similar episode with my husband, and we couldn't make it exciting enough that I wanted to publish it. But I know you're just the person to talk to about campaign data in a way that people who came from a sales ops background will be like, yeah, I get it.
Oh, boy. See, the pressure's on. Now I got to be like exciting and entertaining. Okay. All right. Hold on. Take a couple deep breaths here. Okay. I think we're good.
You're good. So why don't we start with what data has to be present for campaign data to be useful?
Let's just start with this concept of useful, because this really colors a lot of our philosophies around data generally. Is data needs to be useful to have any kind of value. And let me define what I mean by useful. The way that we define useful at Attributa is that it has that particular piece of data or data set can be turned into meaningful action. Okay. Now, usefulness is a very subjective term because different people in different roles, things are useful to them, but not to others. So anytime we think about data, campaign data, we have to keep our audience in mind. Who is the person or the system that is going to be using this data in for some sort of meaningful action? And if it doesn't have any kind of meaningful action, then it has no value. And we should probably just be like, hey, let's move on from this particular data point or data set because we don't really care about it because it's not useful. Let me just give you a really good example of a data point that's just not really useful anymore. It used to be, but now it's not even useful to the point that like, who cares? Like you probably shouldn't even be looking at it ever for anything. And that's like email opens.
Yeah.
Email opens. It's such a polluted data point now because different email clients do different things. Some don't report opens in any way, shape, or form. It's such a polluted data point that there's no usefulness to it anymore. So That's a campaign data point that like, hey, who cares? Let's forget about that.
And I think context or use cases is what you're getting to matters so much because, like you said, what a salesperson cares about when somebody's handed over to them is what did they do most recently? Why am I following up with them? What's the lead? What can I use to follow up with them? I think we forget that a lot in marketing sometimes, especially with lead scoring, if we don't have really advanced capabilities where the lead scoring itself can give like a description of exactly why this happened and they have access to a history log. And even then, the salespeople are probably like, you know what? Let me know when they request a demo. Depends on the org. But with marketers, they're interested in everything. Like you have people who are split up by different roles. They want to get really into the weeds on what they're doing specifically, whereas CMO may not, probably doesn't want to get to that level. So let's talk a little bit about the use cases you're used to seeing, and then maybe we can talk about what data we need to actually action on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's several different kind of primary use cases, and I'm going to call them primary use cases because you can find some little niches for almost any data point. But let's talk about like big primary things that move the needle types of use cases. So number one is, it's in the name of my business, it's attribution and reporting, right? So huge use case for campaign data in attribution and reporting. And we'll just call it attribution and measurement because there's different types of measurement. So attribution and measurement, that's one of the big use cases. Another big use case is actioning. So the ability to action off of a piece of campaign data. Now that action can take a number of different forms. It could be lead scoring action. It could be the action of, hey, this piece of campaign data is true, therefore we are going to send this person to sales as a hot lead or a hand raiser or whatever. That could be one of the actions that we take. It could be creating a dynamic audience that we then push into an advertising platform, orchestrating data across systems. That's another use case for campaign data. Another use case for campaign data, another large use case for campaign data is, so we talked about actioning, but I'm going to take like another like sub use case off of actioning, which is an immediate next step. Right? Not like actioning in terms of like lead scoring or lead assignment or whatever, but like sending the next piece of information, right? That's another big use case for campaign data. Those are the ones that are coming off the top of my head. I'm sure there's some other ones out there, but those are the big ones that come up most frequently.
Yeah, I agree that I can't think of any others beyond that at the moment. I know there's dozens, but I think those are the big buckets. So maybe we look at use cases and notice how we're keeping this really product agnostic right now in terms of CRM and marketing automation, because no matter which vertical you're working with, like what, or if you're in B2B SaaS, who you're selling to, the data points and use cases are pretty similar, if not extremely similar. And the products throw their own challenges, but let's start at the use case level and talk about what kind of data for these use cases we really need to make the most of that data.
Yeah, absolutely. There's three primary categories of campaign data that need to be tracked and categorized in order to achieve most of these use cases. So first and foremost is time series data. So time series data is a really fancy way of saying I need to have timestamps, date and timestamps for my campaign data. I need to know when this thing happened, when this person interacted with this campaign. That's important for attribution because I have to know where in the funnel this thing happened. It's important for actioning because if I don't know when something happened, I don't know when to take a next step. It's important for things like if it is going to trigger like some sort of like a lead routing mechanism, it's important because then I have to know how long did it take to go from the campaign action to the lead routing to the actual sales rep taking the action, right? So you got to have that date and time stamp there. So date time stamp, time series data is quite possibly the most important part of campaign data that applies to every single use case you can possibly have. Now, another one, oh, go ahead.
It's a little ironic with some of the systems we work with. Okay. So sorry I interrupted you.
No worries. So time series data is quite possibly the most important piece of data that you can capture related to a campaign. And it is that across all the use cases for campaign data. Whether you're orchestrating it to other systems, actioning off of it immediately, attribution and measurement, like you have to know when somebody engaged with that campaign or when that campaign happened. Now, another really critical piece of information is category level. And when we think about systems, there's really two easy systems to analogize this with, which is campaign type or Marketo program channel, right? We all know campaign type in Salesforce. We all know Marketo program channel in Marketo. HubSpot does it a little bit differently, but that categorization is really important. It's really important from an attribution to measurement perspective because we have to be able to categorize like campaigns together, right? So we have to be able to categorize webinars for attribution to measurement as a webinar category. You can have subcategories, but we got to have categories. For actioning, it's really important to have that category level information as well because, again, if you're actioning off of it for something like lead scoring, you might give different scoring values for different categories of campaigns. Are you going to score an email click the same level you're going to score a webinar attendance? Absolutely not. We have to know the categorization to be able to understand how it should be scored. But that's also really important for other actioning that you might be doing. If you're going to be orchestrating, let's say, for example, we have a use case where we want to take somebody engaged with a campaign and build a custom LinkedIn audience and pass that audience into LinkedIn. It's really important to know the category of the campaign that they engaged with, because if the category of the campaign they engaged with is LinkedIn, maybe they're not a candidate for this particular audience. Maybe it's a follow-up to a specific type of communication or type of campaign. That's why we're going to put them into the LinkedIn audience, right? So you've got to have that category level information.
Because on the surface, it seems pretty simple, but those of us who've been working with marketing data know that sometimes we can get kind of two categories at once through UTM parameters and the form fill. And then sometimes ads feed directly on the ad platform through a form, and sometimes it's through that UTM parameter. So how do you encourage people to think about that?
Yeah, so the way to think about that is, I have two key principles as it relates to this question that you're asking. Number one is consistency. We have to be consistent in the way that we name things, whether that's a campaign type or a marketing program channel or a UTM medium value or whatever. We have to be consistent, because if you're not consistent, none of this works. None of this is going to work. So consistency is our number one principle there. Number two is normalization. Because you might have data coming in from different sources, like I might have a campaign type coming in, I might have a UTM medium coming in, I might have a UTM source coming in, I might have a marketing program channel coming in. You cannot rely on those particular fields, because now I've just said 4 different fields. So how am I going to create categories when the source of that data is from 4 different fields? So you need a field that essentially collects and normalizes those disparate sources that I can say, okay, this is my category here. If you have that in place, consistency and normalization, you really can't be beat when it comes to this particular piece of campaign data. If you're doing those two things well, you're not going to have a lot of challenges with categorization. You're just not.
I just wish I walked into that scenario more often.
You and me both.
Yeah, it's something that's easy to miss in certain places, or maybe you're tired of wrangling a team who wants to use the Google developer UTM builder and go rogue. So I understand why it happens. I do, now that I've said that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, I don't know how this happens, but there's a lot of people in 2026 that still don't understand UTMs. And I get it. Sometimes you just have to grin and bear it and just deal with it. But those two principles are going to help you with that categorization more than anything else. If you get those two things right, you're in fantastic shape. Now, in addition to categorization, we have to have you can call it the status, but I actually prefer to call it like the mode of engagement or the method of engagement. We think of a status as like a campaign member status or a Marketo program member status.
Like literally what they did.
Those. Yeah, literally what they did, because there's different types of engagement. Let's use trade show for an example. I used to coordinate 100 trade shows a year when I was an event manager for 7 years. There's different forms of engagement at a trade show. There's what I call the trick-or-treaters. They're the people that come by the booth, they've got their bag open, they say, scan my badge, and they take your little trinket, and that's all they're there for. They're just the trick-or-treaters, right? That is a form of engagement. I need to differentiate that method of engagement from somebody that actually has a 15-minute conversation with me at the booth, right? They both visited the booth, but they engaged with me very differently at the booth, and I need to be able to differentiate that method of engagement. Same thing with, if we're talking about a webinar, I need to differentiate the method of engagement if somebody attends live or if they attend on demand. And again, most systems have this down as like a status field of some sort. Not all do though. So no matter what, you need to capture that method of engagement. That's again going to be really important for attribution and measurement. It's going to be really important for actioning because I'm going to take a vastly different action, follow-up action after a trade show for a trick-or-treater than somebody I had a 15-minute conversation with. The trick-or-treater might get dumped into a nurture program, whereas the person that we had the 15-minute conversation with might be an auto-qualifier and sent to sales, right? So we have to know the method of engagement. Super important. Those three things are probably the three most important things that you can capture when it comes to campaign data: the time series data, the categorization, and the method of engagement. Now, there's a couple of other pieces of data that I think are really important to capture. Number one is something that is, in my opinion, vastly underutilized, is some sort of a unique identifier for that campaign, particularly when we're talking about multi-channel campaigns.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Preach.
Think of like a big product launch. We're doing a big product launch. You don't announce a new product on email and that's it. No, you've got stuff on LinkedIn. You're going to do advertising on AdWords. You're going to do some display ads. You're going to do emails. You might do a webinar. You might do a series of in-person events. You've got all these different things that you're going to do to launch this new product if you're launching it. You need some sort of unique identifier across all of those individual tactics within that campaign that allows you to unify that campaign as one holistic campaign so you can see it as more than the sum of the parts, right? Because the parts are the ways that you've actually executed this campaign, but the campaign is more than that. It's much bigger than that. So you have to have a unique identifier. Now, a lot of people ask me like, okay, cool, what should our unique identifier be? And that, honestly, I don't care. It's flippant to say that, but I don't care. As long as you have one and you follow the number one rule that I mentioned about all campaign data is that it's got to be consistent. As long as you have a methodology to create a unique identifier and it's consistent, then we're fine. That typically resolves as to one of two different things. Number one is just a text version of what the name of the campaign is, probably simplified down so that it can be added in as part of a UTM campaign, as part of a Salesforce campaign, as part of a HubSpot campaign, as part of a Marketo program, whatever. Kind of like the root value of the campaign name that can be replicated across all the different places where we're tracking this. Either that, or we see a lot of times organizations will have, if you're using project management, a lot of times you'll have an actual project ID from a project management system, some sort of unique identifier in the project management system that ties this whole campaign together in the project management system. And you can use that as well. That's a little bit more difficult to use because then you have to have almost like this translation layer of, I've got this like random identifier. What does that translate to in terms of friendly English words? So you can do either one. Those two are probably the most common that we see for this unique identifier. But again, it really doesn't matter how you select your unique identifier as long as you're consistent and you do it. Because if you do it one way with the project management ID and then the other way, and the next campaign we do it with the root value of the campaign name, now we got conflicting types of data there. So we got to be consistent so that if we have to have this translation layer, we have it for everything.
I really like that you didn't recommend parent campaign because it just complicates reporting tremendously by removing it at least one object. And then in HubSpot, you've got these weird union objects that then link to other. I really like that you're promoting some kind of text ID on. Usually I'm a little squeamish about text, but you're absolutely right. Whatever is easiest for you and most consistent, just do it that way. I like it. Yeah.
Keep it simple. Simplicity scales, complexity does not scale.
And I would add that Salesforce lies about the parent object, because I've had so many marketing teams want reporting tied to that, and they've embedded and organized their campaigns by campaign type and all these other region, business unit, and all these layers, and they don't understand that each of those layers is a separate record that has to be re-identified with all of the children. And Salesforce can't do that in Salesforce when you get more than one object removed. So just word to the wise from somebody who's made plenty of mistakes in her life. Don't do it.
Yeah, it just overcomplicates things for something that doesn't need to be that complicated. It really doesn't. Yeah. So it's cool if you do it and you've got you've built all the architecture and infrastructure to make it work. But that is a lot of time and energy and effort for something that can be solved with just a consistent root value.
Yeah, and I rarely see the infrastructure in place when that stuff's used. So just don't do it.
No, it's very rare. It's very
Love
rare.
It.
There's one last piece of campaign data that I'm going to call out here that I think is super important and a lot of times underutilized as well, is some level of account information tied to the person that engaged with the campaign. It can be anything from like the actual company name, right? Or some sort of audience targeting parameter, right? If it's part of a target account group, which target account group is it from? If it's not part of a target account group, but we have an account information, we got to have that information, because now this one, again, it's across all of our use cases. Attribution and measurement, everybody wants to know which accounts actually engaged with this campaign. Everybody wants to know that, particularly the minute that campaign data gets outside the walls of marketing, it's always going to be which accounts engaged, who engaged. And when they say who engaged, most of the time it's accounts, not people. So
there's a language barrier between sales and marketing and the rest of the organization, really.
Yeah, absolutely. For actioning, if we don't know the account that took this action, it makes it really difficult to take that next step. Again, whether that's an assignment for a hot lead, or lead scoring isn't really affected by account unless there's some sort of account-based scoring that goes into that. Any kind of actioning, a lot of times we need to know the account, because if it was somebody that's already a customer and we can't sell something else to this account, okay, then we don't need to action off of it. Or maybe we just need to drop them into a nurture that's, hey, by the way, you're already a customer. Did you know that? Like, there's a lot of different ways that you would follow up on something depending on who the account is, right? So that account level information, I think, is super important to make sure that we're capturing that, whether that's the exact account or something a little bit more complex, like a target account list or something along those lines. That's going to help tremendously for these use cases.
All of it's right. I love it. This is why I talk to you. So when we're talking about all of this from an AI perspective, what's really important to keep in mind here?
Yeah, so AI, and we're at Attributa, we're starting to get really into AI right now. We're building an AI agent that's going to be launching. By the time somebody's hearing this podcast, we'll have launched it. It's really focused on attribution and measurement. But when you think about AI, there's really a couple of key things that you need to keep in mind with AI as it relates to any data source. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about campaign data. But number one is, if you feed an AI bad, messy data, that anything that AI spits out is also going to be bad and messy, because it can help clean your data. It can help normalize your data. If you've got like a fantastic use case for how AI can actually clean and normalize data that's messy data, is how AI can really enhance the functionality of how did you hear about us on your website, particularly if you're structuring that as an open text field. AI can really do some great stuff with that. But generally speaking, if you've got messy data, AI is just going to spit out messy data back at you. So that consistency principle is exponentially more important when it comes to AI, because if, regardless of whether you're using AI for attribution and measurement or AI for actioning or whatever, that AI has to have good, reliable data. Otherwise, it's going to make mistakes. And that's not going to be the fault of your AI agent. That's going to be the fault of your data. Number one is that consistency of the data. And therefore the cleanliness, because cleanliness, a lot of cleanliness, the biggest data cleanliness problems I come across usually is a lack of consistency. That's usually the biggest ones I come across.
Or just gaps in connectivity and integrations and, just technical things that maybe they didn't have an operator at the time, or I don't know. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Those two. Whew.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a standpoint of the data being consistent and clean and good for AI, like that's going to be one of the biggest things that we have to think about for AI. The other thing we have to think about is what is the AI doing as our output? So AIs can do a million different things. They can do marketing attribution measurement. They can do actioning. They can write content. They can determine what the next best action is. But for them to be able to do that, again, they have to have some sort of understanding of who this person is, what their account is, and how they engaged with us at this particular type or category of campaign. Without that information, that AI is going to be it's going to have to make a lot of assumptions. And the more and more I learn about AI, the less and less you want it to make assumptions. It can make assumptions. AI does reasoning. It's one of the cool things that happened when they made AI. It was an unexpected, it's actually using reasoning and logic. We didn't expect that, but that's actually an outcome of teaching it language. So they can reason and use logic, but they're not anywhere near as good at it as humans are. So
they don't have all the context. It's just,
right.
It's not their fault.
Yeah, exactly. So you want the AI to make the least amount of assumptions as possible, which means that your data has to be crystal clear as to when we're intaking it and the AI is using it, and then what that output is going to be. If that data is not crystal clear and we aren't giving that AI the type of data that it needs to run its logic, the logic that we tell it to make, the reasoning that we tell it to make, as opposed to the assumptions, allowing it to make assumptions, if it doesn't have the necessary data to follow the logic that we designed for it, it's going to fail, or it's going to have to fall back on its own assumptions. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to fall back on its own assumptions. A lot of times when we're building really good AI agents, you will actually tell the agent, look, if you are unsure, don't make something up. Just say, I do not have the information required to answer that question, or I do not have the information required to take that action. Don't make something up, because that's where you get into hallucinations and all the negativity around AI. So if we can't get the AI enough information to do what it needs to do, then it should fail without hallucinations. It should just stop. And so that data needs to be crystal clear so that AI can use it appropriately and not have to make assumptions and make stuff up. We don't want it to make stuff up.
100%. And let me know if this is on track with what you're communicating. What I'm hearing is building the reports and maybe even analyzing them to a degree has gotten easier with AI, but where we're still on the hook is making sure the data is structured appropriately. We're capturing the right data points, and then we're spending the time to train and enable the team who's going to be using the inputting into our systems. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because even as advanced as AI is, you still have to tell it the data that it's ingesting. It's not going to know intuitively. Let's say, for example, we're doing the right things with multi-channel campaigns, and we're capturing a unique identifier, whether it's a campaign ID from a project management system or just a root term for the natural language that we call the campaign. If we don't tell the AI, hey, this field is used for this, and when somebody wants to do anything related to a campaign, if it's a multi-channel campaign, you need to look for this. You have to tell the AI what this thing means and how to use it. So if we haven't intentionally designed our data capture and data structure in a way that we can actually advise the AI, when this comes up, go look at this field and here's what that field is. If you can't tell the AI that, it's going to fall apart. You have to be able to, I'm going to this might be the most important thing that I say in this entire podcast. You have to have a data dictionary. If you don't have a data dictionary, you cannot use AI for stuff like this. You can, but it's gonna fail more frequently than it succeeds. You have to have a rock solid data dictionary for your campaign data if it's going to be attached to anything AI related.
That is a highlight reel moment. I love it.
How many clients do you know have a data dictionary for their campaign data?
Actually, at least one, honestly, and it's because I built it. But I can give a super simple example of how AI reasoning can go right in this context. So it's not campaign related, but it's super simple. So I was working with an AI platform. It does have a data dictionary. It has some guardrails. I do not have it attached to right to production because this exact example. So I'm talking to it. I said, identify for me all of the duplicate contacts that I should merge. It came back with everyone with a blank email address, regardless of first name, last name, company they were associated with, and wanted to merge it. So, like Drew said, don't let it drive by itself. It's a student driver, and don't immediately write to production when it comes to logic like deduplication and writing over things that already exist.
Well, that's just a great example of the reasoning and logic that it is capable of. It's looking at, hey, they all have the exact same email address. It just happens to be empty. So we're going to merge them all into one record. And it's okay. If you had told it, hey, if you see an email address that's empty, skip it and don't consider it.
Yeah, my advice.
Yeah, go ahead.
My advice to that AI analytics company was to start developing those guardrails because not everybody who's a user of theirs will know. So
yes.
If you have an AI analytics platform, guardrails, data dictionary, don't let everybody change the definitions or ask their own questions outside of the dictionary. You're just creating more work for RevOps. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that goes for if you're using AI to action on anything, it goes the same way. Yeah. If you're using AI to write content, for example, if it doesn't know who the person is and it doesn't have the right information, it's just going to go do what it thinks is right. And that's the thing with AI. It is a statistical database that predicts what the next letter is going to be. So it's going to write something, period, end of story. Whether it's the right thing or what you want it to write is irrelevant to it. It's just going to write something. So if you aren't feeding it the right information, what it spits out as output, so if we're using it to write emails or using it to write blogs or whatever, or ads, if it doesn't have the right information that it needs, it's going to spit something out and it's not going to be very good.
Yeah, definitely. Any more you want to touch on the AI piece before we briefly touch on how the systems can make this difficult for us, and just a couple examples?
I would say the only thing that I would say is for years I've talked about don't wait until you need the data to start caring about the data. And I think that AI just makes that even more true exponentially because how risky AI can be if you feed it bad data. So if AI is on your roadmap in any way, shape, or form, before you start building AI agents, you need to start optimizing your data. Period. End of story. Don't start anything with AI until you've figured out your data nightmares.
It's a tough building to climb, but necessary. So let's touch on how the systems can make it hard on us. I will start by picking on Salesforce because I usually pick too much on the other systems. Lead object. You know how you said you have to know the account that's associated with every campaign? Lead object complicates things a bit. Parent-child hierarchies can really complicate things instead of just using one unifying identifier across all those campaigns. Any more rocks you want to throw at Salesforce before we move on?
Yeah, custom objects. They're great for storing data. The problem is the way Salesforce has architected them and the way Salesforce has architected their integrations, they're incredibly difficult to get any value of outside of Salesforce. So I love the functionality and the concept behind it, but the way it's architected is it's so difficult to use custom objects for measurement and reporting because you've got an object limit in your reports in Salesforce. It can only be so many steps away from the primary object, and you can only put so many objects into a report type. It sucks for actioning because most of the systems that take action on things either can't use custom objects for that or they use it very poorly. So I think
I see it all the time when a custom field on an existing object would do.
Right. Yes.
Like, don't rebuild the functionality that already exists to get an additional feature. Just don't do it. Look at additional fields. I see that a lot actually on the campaign object where we're using parents instead of creating a pick list or a text field that would do the same thing. So just be careful about over-engineering.
Yeah. I've seen orgs use custom objects for opportunity contact roles. That's literally just the exact same functionality, just in a custom object.
I've seen it for opportunities.
I was just about to say that. I've seen that
too.
My
mind.
Yeah. I was like, why are we using custom objects for opportunities? We needed to do this. And I'm like, you could have done that just fine with a regular opportunity object. Why? This makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you are listening to this and you are working with a consultant that's telling you to use a custom object for something that already has a standard object, you need a second opinion. Definitely need a second opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. We could talk about Marketo. Eloqua's not as present in the market as it used to be. Maybe we just touch on HubSpot because their data structure can be a little tricky to navigate.
And it keeps getting trickier and trickier. I mean, how many different permutations of campaigns has HubSpot had over the last several years? A lot. And how do those campaigns interact with Salesforce campaigns? Not well. Yeah, HubSpot, I think a lot of the decisions that they've made around their data architecture has been around making sure that the data stays in HubSpot and doesn't leave HubSpot because they want you on every single hub they own or that they sell. And so they've created their own architecture and data structure to force you into that. I feel like, I don't know, I do a lot more work with Marketo than HubSpot. So like, I'm just going off, I'm not as in it as I am with like Marketo.
Preaching to the choir. It's a system I'm in all the time, and one of the hardest things to get to is the date somebody interacted and exactly what they did, unless you reverse engineer it through form interactions, list loads, etc., which is really frustrating. Sometimes they force you to buy the data hub. Sometimes you just can't get into the information and you have to recreate it. So some of us have resorted to using a custom object in MQL events, just so the salespeople can see what happened, because you cannot see which campaign somebody interacted with on the contact, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Table stakes.
That's a problem. Yeah, that's table stakes. Absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like HubSpot's done a lot of things from a data architecture and data structure standpoint that's made things even more difficult to track campaign data.
Yeah, but they're always evolving, so maybe tomorrow we'll have a different fix. So here's to hope.
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to see how, because I know that there's a lot of fairly new marketing automation platforms that have come out recently, and one that I know that's still building in stealth, that's the John Miller platform. I'm really interested to see how they're going to handle this challenge. I'm sure John Miller's going to have some thoughts and ideas and some new ways of thinking about stuff. I know that there's a new platform out there, fairly new platform out there called Paminga that looks like it's got some really cool features and functionality and might think about campaigns in a slightly different way and campaign data. Really interested to see how, because we're absolutely about to enter the next generation of marketing automation that's AI native versus AI bolted on, and it's going to be interesting to see how this next generation structures campaign data and if they can learn lessons from some of the marketing automation platforms and data structures that we've been using for years now.
Yeah, I keep figuring if these things have been around since I started my career, it's time for the next thing to take over. So just keep an eye on the horizon because it's coming.
Yeah. That and CRMs too, because I was just talking about from a marketing automation standpoint, but I'm sure there's some AI native CRMs that are coming down the pipe too that are, I'm sure, thinking about campaign structure and campaign data in very different ways.
I sure hope so. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it shakes out. Let's put it that way. There's always pain when you first change things. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're all fine.
Yeah.
Drew, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you to work with you and network?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is attributa.io. We have a YouTube page where you get to hear or see more of me. I'm sorry, or you're welcome. It's basically just go to YouTube and search for Attributa and you'll find our page. Obviously on LinkedIn, Drew Smith and Attributa on LinkedIn. Yeah, any of those places is where you can find us. And if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Great. And thank you again for the deep dive. It's really appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode, everybody.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.
Keep it RevOpsAF, y'all.